Okay.
Yeah. Welcome into Shaping Reality for March 2026. Oh my gosh, here we are. Welcome in, Penny. How are you doing today?
I'm really well. It was a luxury day for me. So,
Okay, so just really quickly, tell us what a luxury day for you is.
it starts by sleeping in because Monday is typically my day off. And so I did because last night I worked until 2. So I slept in today. And then it follows with a very luxurious breakfast of fruit and bagels, and then about an hour in the tub, just soaking. And then little things like cutting my toenails and filing my fingernails and washing my hair, and not having to do anything or be anywhere until 6 o'clock tonight. So it was just one of those wonderful days where I sort of had time to think, time to look at what's going on. That doesn't happen very often. So, but I try to get a day like that at least twice a month. So it was today.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And you're looking all spring-like in your beautiful bright colors.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, spring is here. I'm not sure that it's quite what I love about spring, but it'll get there. It'll get there. It's still pretty cold. Today, I think we got up to 35.
So that is cold.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think I was really looking forward to tonight, because when you get to spend a day looking at what's happening in the world and listening to all of the voices and all of the input, and I ended up thinking, wow, I had some other things on my mind. I almost changed our topic at the last minute. But I think we really need to talk about what's happening and what's not happening. And what's not happening is people have no clue what's going on. They don't know why. They don't know who to believe. They don't know who to listen to. And so after listening, actually, for the last day or two, it's like, oh, wow. People are still, what do you call that? Tunnel vision. They're still just looking right what's in front of them, or speaking from what I'll call the old points of view and the old arguments and the old expectations and the old perspectives. And I don't hear very much about the new. So it's like, well, we'll see. And at this point, our job is to watch.
From my perspective, and I had mentioned earlier, between the two of us, just as a citizen of this country, or just a person in the collective, what I'm seeing out in the world feels very old. Feels like just repetition of the same old stuff. Unauthorized aggression against other countries, lies about why we're there, not a lot of good information. It just feels like, are we still doing this? And I have found myself, after spending hours trying to understand what the motivation could be, or the intent, or the purpose, or the goal, I finally just gave up, because I can't figure out who to believe or what to believe. And I certainly don't believe anybody in office.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Remember the Q posts way back in 2016, 2017, something like that, 2017. I have all of those. I actually printed them. I have 4 books of Q posts. And in the very, very beginning, when they were putting out these messages that said, we're going to take back our country and you need to get ready. Couple of things that they said were, the military is the only way. And I thought, okay, so they're going to use the military. Big deal. So what? But it didn't mean then what it means now. The next thing that sort of stuck in my mind, that, of all the things that Q said, was, we're saving Israel for last. And I thought, okay. And then I would watch Trump and I would see that he really didn't like Netanyahu. And then, and then I would see that it looked like he was getting along with him just fine, and back and forth and back and forth. And I thought, okay, something's not right there. Something is happening there that is not on the up and up, is how I ended up. Okay, that bears watching. So, so the whole thing with, what does that mean? Israel's going to be saved for last. And then just the knowledge of, you know, I've been watching for such a long time, of where the power centers of the world are, and knowing that everything is controlled by the deep state. I'm hearing people say, Trump didn't ask Congress. Congress is controlled by the deep state. He couldn't ask them, hey, I want to go to war against you guys. They aren't going to say yes. They wouldn't have voted yes. He couldn't ask them. And so he had to go ahead and do what he thought was necessary to do. And he said in the Q post, the ending will not be for everyone. And what he meant by that is some people aren't going to like the way this has to end. It's not going to be pretty. It isn't going to be, you know, the smooth way, etc. And when you put those all together, you know, the military is the only way, and Israel is being saved for last, and then, you know, the ending won't be for everyone. They expected 5 to 10% of the people to just go berserk. Okay, this is terrible. This is awful. This is criminal. Blah blah blah. But the entire planet was being controlled by some people, and I'm just going to say what I've said before, except I'm going to say it more bluntly, by some people who are not from here.
Right.
They want our planet. They're using certain people to get control of our planet, and they had it, they thought, locked up. And the poor Jewish people, they, you know, they've been used for so many things, and there's some information coming out about the Jewish people that I think it's already out in a few places, but they have just been used and used again and used again, and they don't see it. They haven't gotten it yet, and they're hanging on to their history and their heritage for dear life, but I don't think they have a clue, especially today's Jewish people, what that heritage and history really is. I think they've been fed a line of crap, you know, that's as wide as the Detroit River and just about as long as the St. Lawrence River. And so that, you know, that is something that they're going to have to realize. But I think, you know, back to the power centers, you know, the deep state was taking over everybody, had control of the US, had control of London, had control of Israel, and had control of Iran. The US was the, you know, the military side of things. And that's why we see some military talking about revolt right now against Trump. And I'm hoping that that doesn't happen. That would be a mess. The city of London was the center of the Rothschild, what would you call it, empire? I think they call it the empire now that I think about it. They wanted to have Israel as their center of the world. And they were going to run the whole world. Once everything was locked up, they were going to run the whole world from Israel. It's a nice middle of the planet kind of spot. Okay, good weather, a little dry, but all of that. And they bankrolled a whole bunch of Jewish people to come in there and build that incredible area, Israel. And now it's pretty much a mess. So we have these power centers. What was Iran? Iran was the source of the oil money that kept feeding the Rothschild bankers. So Iran, Iran also, through the Rothschild, was bankrolling Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, somebody else. I think there were maybe 4 groups, and they were being used by the deep state to just keep heckling and hassling everybody. So here we are. Trump, I think, if he's doing what it looks like he's doing, I'll give him some credit. I don't like the war. I don't like war, period. Okay. But if you look at what he's doing, he's saying, I got a few people. We've got a plan. We're working our plan. And the goal is really not to crush Iran. It's to send a message to the deep state that says, you don't control them anymore. And that's really what it's about. And the media, the news, is lying through their teeth about everything. They're blowing up one side. They're minimizing the other side. They're maximizing the damage and the criminality of the U.S. I mean, it's just the news. I'm afraid that's going to be the fly in the soup, so to speak. And what do we have? At least here in the U.S., we've got thousands, maybe millions of people who have no clue, who are just looking at and listening to what the news is saying. And a lot of the really good observers that are out there, I'm talking about people like Scott Ritter, Doug McGregor. There's a couple of guys who run various podcasts. They have some really good people on. JMC Chambers. Bozy is another one who's kind of in the know, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of them. There's probably 7 or 8 of them that are really, they're military, big military background, and they're not fooled by anything that's happening. And but they're talking about everything from just the military point of view and what's happening militarily, and not the bigger picture, which is what's happening with the deep state. So the deep state has been kind of forced to let go of China. What's happening in China? They have a full-blown revolt going. Chinese leaders and their families are being killed, just outright killed. Xi Jinping is kind of in hiding. The letting go, they got pushed just like we did. The Chinese people got pushed in the same way that the American people have been pushed. And we're still under the control of the deep state. They're not. And those people they've had it right up to here. And so they are taking out all kinds of people that they don't like. And I'm afraid that that's going to happen here. I don't want that. But we don't have a congressmen on either side that are really, what I'm going to say, that really are free of the deep state. They're not free to do what they think is right, period. We still have a captive government. And I think that's going to have to come down. It's looking more and more. Then I'm like, no, that makes for big chaos. I mean, I would love a government that works and that is favorable. But when you have a system that has gotten as rotten at the core as ours is, And you have so many judges and lawyers and medical and scientists and Congress people and bankers that are all, under the thumb of that deep state. People are so comfortable, they don't realize that they're living in the swamp, and they have been for the last 50, 60 years. It's like, wow, you're wrecking our life. No, your life was headed toward complete slavery. And ask those people who got the shot, who do they trust? What do they think about where we're headed and what is happening in terms of medical? They're trying to get another pandemic going, and I'm like, you buggers, leave things alone. So the American people are just seem to be, I'm going to use your word from last time, or maybe from, you had an analysis that you sent me. I think it was 5% of the people are fighting, 15% are kind of resisting, and the other, or maybe 10% are resisting. Anyway, 85% are clueless. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is a perfect analysis of where we're at. And so what is the big problem that I see coming? People just blow up, and they blow up all of Trump's efforts and don't realize that he's trying to just take down the deep state, and some things have not gone as smoothly as he liked, but they're going. And he's, as soon as he gets what I'll call it, like let's talk from Iran, as soon as he gets a signal from Iran, he's like, okay, that's the end of the war. We're out of it. Let's talk. Let's make something good happen. Nobody really wants to talk with us or trust us. So it could be just a come on, to get at Trump himself. But what I see is Trump is probably going to talk. They're going to set up some talks, and they're going to try to move in the next direction. And the next direction is either going to be North Korea or China. And I don't think they really need to do anything with either one of those countries, because I think the Chinese people are doing it for them. So we're in a place now where everything political, everything governmental is about to crash in a big way. And I think we're going to lose a lot of really big leaders, and that includes Trump somewhere this year. Where does that leave us? I don't know. Will that satisfy some people's need to be rid of Trump? Does that make sure we're secure? No. Does that make sure we have a working government? No. And if Trump is the one saying, come on, let's talk, or I'll blow up, it's kind of like the three little pigs. I was thinking this the other day, little pig, let me come in. That's Trump knocking on the door. He's a big bad wolf. And the little pig says no. And he says, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. And so that's Trump. He's saying, come and talk, let me in, or I'm going to blow your house down. And people test that a little bit and then decide, okay, that's enough. Let's talk. But Trump is so limited in what he can do or say. And I'm giving him a lot of rope to hang himself here. If he hangs himself, I'm gonna be like, oh well, sucker, you did it to yourself. I'm just not gonna feel bad for you. So, but the thing that concerns me is, are there enough people who understand that it's up to us at this point? It's all up to us. Every single bit of it from here on out if we are squawking and screaming and carrying on and complaining about Trump, what are we not doing? That's the big question. And what we're not doing, if we're doing that, is everybody's complaining. Nobody's thinking creatively. Nobody's taking responsibility. We don't have to love Trump. We don't have to like the way he's going about doing this deep state thing, but there is a plan, and it's a big plan. It's not like 3 pages.
Is that the one that you said you felt like Kennedy wrote back in this before he
way
was
back?
Yeah,
like 1,000 pages.
Okay, here's a stumbling block, and trust me, I have 500 stumbling blocks with what you said, so I'll try to narrow it down.
Okay.
From my perspective, and I would guess a lot of people watching,
Uh-huh.
your take is very different than my take, or people, because the information that I have is limited based on what people are doling out, and I recognize that. Here's one of the big sticking points for me.
Okay.
If Iran is the money, the oil money for the city of London.
Yeah.
Then why on earth would Israel want to bomb Iran? Israel is the city of London.
That's true. And I did argue with, a little bit within myself, because you have to stop that flow. There's a small chance, I'd say it's probably 1%, that Netanyahu is really kind of going along with Trump. Look at it from the point of view, how many Jewish people want to be under the thumb of the deep state? Do they even know that they are?
Population, I would say 0, but Netanyahu's not even Jewish. He's Polish.
I know. So, yeah, he's a puppet. There's a lot of puppets out there, a lot of them.
Well, a lot of people would say that Trump is just a puppet, that he was installed to do.
That's true. He might be. You have to, when you're going to argue a point of view, you have to go the whole distance. When you get all done, you can set that aside and say, okay, what else could it be? Because it could be something else. One of the points that I have taken all the way to the end is Trump is doing this to preserve the American way so that he can run everything instead of the deep state.
And I thought of that. It's like, okay, if we take down the deep state, then do we have,
what do we have?
We have another system of control. It's like, are the big guns just battling it out for who's going to run Earth? That
one thing right there, I think Doug McGregor says it best.
Is that
correct? What's next? Or how does he say it? Okay, so you do this and you bomb that, and you kill all this, then what? What's the plan?
Right.
And so I think we have the big mistake that I think Trump is making is he's not sharing the plan with the people who need to back him. And if he's not willing to do that, there might be a good reason for that, but that may be one of those fatal flaw, fly in the soup kinds of things. Because if he goes ahead and takes this risk and takes out, pulls the legs out from under the deep state, but doesn't decapitate it, and then something happens to him, that deep state could reconstitute itself and we're all back in the same, swamp again. So without the people saying, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? What's in it for us? And what's the plan afterwards? Then he's risking that the people are going to tear him and the whole thing apart. And that's a big, big risk right now. because that's what I see is people are going to tear it apart. They're not going to understand what was happening because they thought that the swamp was a few politicians and a couple bankers. They didn't realize it was the whole way of life in throughout the West, throughout the planet.
The entire planet.
Yeah. Yeah, they were busy stepping through, taking over everything. So there's, so back to the question of why would Netanyahu take out Iran? Okay, when you get a megalomaniac, and the megalomaniac is Netanyahu, and he thinks Trump is his best friend. And it's not well known that the United States has, 300 years worth of oil, and that we have other technology that is coming that doesn't need oil. Then Netanyahu could say, okay, let's take out Iran, all of their docks, their shipping, their pumping stations, their refineries, take out everything, because we got a friend over here in our back pocket. And it's, I think when Netanyahu bombed some of those Iranian refineries, Trump was like, oh my God, that was not, you were not supposed to do that. But Netanyahu he's a problem child. He is a genuine kind of a psychopath combination, sociopath idiot that is, he's just, let me not say anymore. He's just not good. Okay. So he went ahead and did that. And that, the blowback in Trump's camp was, oh my God, somebody get a hold of him and tell him don't you dare do another thing like that. But, those are the kind of back channel messages that most people don't know about and don't understand is happening. And they don't. So, and it's so complex that we're not done yet. We're just not done yet in terms of seeing war. We're not done with this fight. If we want to be free, what does that mean? Free of what? What would you think? What would be the biggest thing to be free of?
Control.
Control of?
Controlled by.
Controlled by? What? How does that manifest?
It manifests in manipulated markets, in a reduction of freedoms.
True.
In a slave lifestyle.
Yeah.
Control of things like the weather, the food. In other words, we are no longer the regular population. It's like we're not free to live on the earth and take advantage of the resources of the earth.
Okay. You mean all those resources that have been ruined and polluted by those deep staters?
Yeah, we're using our paper straws, Penny, because we're gonna
make a difference, huh?
It's gonna make a difference, doggone it.
Right. So the control is by religion. It's control by education. It's control by governmental institutions that are there to, quote, help. And they're not really very helpful at all. They don't empower people. They rescue, and some of them actually are decent. They rescue. When you need a rescue, you need a rescue. But if that becomes your crutch, and you begin to say, I'm too tired to do that, or I don't want to do that, or I can just do this and they'll give me some money, or they'll give me some food, or they'll give me some medicine, or whatever. There's a kind of control that's really subtle, and it's really ugly. It's really crippling in so many ways. And so the control grid, that's our whole way of life. Jobs. What would we do if we didn't have to go to a job every day? People have no idea what they love. They're just trying to survive. So they get the job, they make the money, they pay the bills. It's never enough money. They spend their life and all their life energy for the best part of their life working for the man, as we used to call it back in the 60s. And then you retire and die. You know, you're dead within 5 years, typically, of retirement. And the people who don't die, who live on until, you know, another 25, 30 years, that's causing the financial system all kinds of grief. What? You know, Social Security was supposed to help a few people after they retired until they died for 5 years, not support them for 25, 35 years until they're 100 years old. But, you know, they didn't think about that. So here we are in this place now where all that control that I think we need to be out from under is the way that we think about one another, see ourselves, and what are we doing here, and the way that we live day to day. If we didn't have the big religions, if we didn't have jobs, if we didn't have the big pharma and the big educational system, and we didn't have the big science telling us, you know, this, that, and whatever, what would we be doing? How would we be living? People don't even think about that.
They don't, because I think it is like a fish in water. The fish doesn't know that's water.
Yeah, right.
In other words, I think that 80% of the people at least conceptualize of a different system, because this has been so, it's everywhere. It's, you know, we're swimming in it.
And I have to say, and I don't want to discourage anybody, you know, or sound, you know, ridiculously irrelevant, but when you've been in other systems and you see how other systems work and how they organize themselves and think about life, and then you come here,
it's got to be crazy making.
There's what is missing is there's no cohesiveness and there's no coherence. People are doing what they hate every day of their life. I'm like, oh, that contributes hate to the pool of consciousness that we're all swimming in. The fish. we're fish swimming in an ocean of consciousness. And that's really coming down to what I think is the biggest problem with this war. This is a war of consciousnesses. This is the kind of war that is often fought, and you get to a place where you get a tipping point, I'll call it, and the people who are trying to make you think this way so they can get control over you realize that's not going to happen. It isn't, you know, there's too many people who are against, who are aware of the game, of the agenda, blah, blah, blah. And they quit. They go away and they look for other fish to fry, so to speak. But when you have an entire population, I think one of the biggest signals for me, I'm trying to remember who it was. It might have been the guy who is considered he wrote the Fingerprint of the Gods, or I think.
Campbell. No, that's the theory of everything.
Anyway, he gave a TED talk on consciousness. It was taken down immediately. Why? That was a long time ago. When I saw that, I thought, okay, the war that's coming is going to be a war of consciousness. That isn't what they call it. They call it a 5D war. They call it like what's his name, Alex Jones says, it's a war on for your mind. It is, but it's a war taking place in consciousness. And the war was started in 1963, actually 1954. But then it really became front and center, 1963. And from then on, it was like the war was fought and there was no opposition. And then along comes Trump. And what all of his bluster and his noise and his swagger, and people see that's as far as they see. They don't see that is something to get attention that says, look what you can do with your consciousness. Now, nobody wants to be like that. Nobody wants to, because that's considered crude or rude or self-centered or. But when you're trying to be a leader, getting people to understand that this is a war in which I'm not just going to say all the Melvin milquetoast things. I'm not going to be nice. I'm not going to follow all the rules. If you're trying to take over, you're trying to fight a war of consciousness, you have to make enough noise to be able to be heard above what I'll call the humdrum of the everyday. And Trump is excellent at that, and he's really not that way. It's all an act. He's learned to put on a fabulous act, and a lot of people judge him on that. And once in a while, I'm like, you could have said that a little differently, Trump. His things that he says, I'm like, oh wow, okay, I can see past that, but there's a lot of people who can't, and they just get irritated. So the war of consciousness that has been taking place was one-sided, and we were being taken over one generation after the next until we got to where we are now, where people are looking back saying, oh, this is the way it's always been. No, it wasn't. And for those of us who are close to 80 years old, you can see we had grandparents and great grandparents that lived in an entirely different way, and not to say that their life was easier, it was a little harder, but that was the hook. Come on, we'll make it easy for you.
Yeah.
Well, it is easy. It's easy to be a slave if you just comply. You just do what you're told. You just eat what you're given. Life is not very happy. You're not very healthy. You don't do what you would love to do. You don't even think about that. There's no mention of consciousness at all. There's no encouragement to develop your full human potential. That's just verboten, German for forbidden, not okay. And so the whole thing, the whole scenario that we're seeing right now is just this war of words. And if you sit back long enough and you just listen and watch both sides, just like you were saying, I've listened both sides. What you're hearing is the war of words. You're hearing the actual war of consciousness. And nobody likes kinetic war where you actually destroy and there's deaths, but there's been a lot of deaths already. I'm going to say probably over 10,000. That's not being shared. There's a lot of people been hurt. And you mentioned in your comments to me, the U.S. bombed a girls' school, 140 children. You said if that happened in the U.S., there'd be total uproar. People would be calling for revenge, for blood, etc. Well, the girls' school did get hit, and all those little girls are gone. However, what is not understood is that there was a military operation in that school as part of that area And that's done over and over. Military sets up in schools, in hospitals, in government buildings, etc., for that exact reason, because they hope the kids will deter the bomb and they'll be safe and they can continue. And that, that just didn't work there. So we have a lot of grief, a lot of grieving parents. I cannot imagine. Oh my gosh. If that was one of my children, I'd be upset. But, when you don't pay attention to what's going on and where are your children and what is that area, that's part of the ignorance and that people are ignorant. People ignore the signs. They ignore the settings. They don't read into anything. Why? Because that's taking responsibility for consciousness. And once you awaken consciousness, you're going to go through a rough patch. Awakening is not fun. It isn't easy. It is exciting. I will say that. It can be very exciting, but it is frightening because your whole world collapses. And once you get through that and you start to look and to listen and to feel and to understand, then all that stuff happening on the surface is like, I don't know, it's like distraction.
Okay, let's kind of go down that road a little bit, Penny, because just in the last couple of days, and I was watching Matthias De Stefano, and he was talking about, you know who he is, right?
Yeah, he's the guy he's in France. I think he's in France.
Yeah, he's South American.
Is he? Okay, and he's the one who kind of came up with some good theories around COVID. So, among other. No, not him.
That's not him. Matthias De Stefano remembers his past lives, and he's the one that did all the lectures on Gaia about the different dimensions and how they were structured.
Okay.
Almost mathematical in his description.
Okay.
So he was talking about, and he was with Robert Edward Grant.
Okay.
So they were talking about everything uncovering now. And he was discussing the trade-off that Earth humans have made in a way.
Right.
I'll try to drill down on that a little more.
Okay.
We stay in our comfort zone. We ignore ugly truths.
Right.
And that's what I'm starting to fiddle around with a little bit, or it's starting to really bubble up, that we have been lured into this sense of comfort, and it's not really that great. It's not what we could be experiencing. It's a false comfort, and it's very surface senses, like, oh, we'll get you a frozen pizza delivered to your house and you don't have to cook, and then you can sit in front of the TV and watch the program that is decades below your abilities, but it entertains you mindlessly. So we have been lured into this mindless rote comfort in exchange for not really looking at the world around us. And I don't think I explained that very well.
You did pretty well, I think.
It's starting to really come up. In other words, we just sort of ignore things, and we don't really look deeply, and we don't really ask, is that ethical, or does that feel good, or that there's just this, it's almost like living in a Stepford environment. The Stepford Wives.
Yeah, I read that years ago.
Yeah. Almost a little like that. And that's kind of what's, and you had said to me a few years ago, we were talking about the child abuse that's coming out now.
Yeah.
And you said, how is it that we're just accepting that? And I was like so shocked and maybe even a little offended. Like, what do you mean? I didn't even know about it. Well,
Sorry.
I didn't know about it consciously, but neither did I drill down to see if it was there
Real.
or
Yeah.
real. So
Yeah.
I chose comfort, or I chose this superficial life
Right.
instead of really looking deeply. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's painful. It's painful to look at what has happened to our world. Um, I'm, I mean, we could all be being fooled by Trump, by the whole bunch, by the whole thing. But at this point, we know we have a deep state. We know we have incredible corruption. We know that the governments are not listening to the people's voice. We know that we know a lot of ugly things about what's happening with children, what's happening with money, what's happening with human slavery. It's not well accepted that humans are being sent off planet to be used elsewhere. That's too much for people to get. They don't want to hear it because I don't know why.
They don't believe it. They don't believe it.
They don't want to believe it. They
That
don't want to because it's uncomfortable, because it's frightening. It's like, what if that happens to me? What if, somebody I know disappears, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of stuff that we have just tried to look the other way and gather in places, little enclaves that, we call gated. And they're gated for a reason, because people gate their minds in those places. They don't want to know the ugly stuff. They're comfortable doing what they're doing. But when it gets to a point that you can't look in any direction without seeing something awful, and then you get a few people who say, I'm going to do something about this, and maybe maybe Trump is going to flub up the whole thing, and we're just going to end up in a massive mess, a massive war, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe something good will come out of all of it in the long run. And maybe people will wake up and say, wow, we need to be much more attentive to what's happening in our world. We need to be much more, clued in. We need to be much more asking the right questions in people's face, not in a mean way. But if you're not going to do those things, if you just want to be comfortable, then you're going to end up with what we've got now. So it's difficult. I can't tell you, there's no way to describe my own waking up process, how awful, how frightening, how difficult it was, because partly because it was so sudden. But, when you wake up to what's happening and you have unlimited consciousness for 3 years, you pretty much by that time have discovered you can't run away from anything. It's all there, the ugly, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's all there. And you have to decide, okay, I'll give somebody the benefit of the doubt. I was listening to somebody just a day or two ago, and they were talking about George Washington and the few men who said, we're going to fight England. We're going to declare whatever. And they were pointing out that that Washington and the soldiers who decided to fight England were not, they were just considered lunatics. It's like, nobody can take out England. Nobody can, what's the matter with you? You're going to get us all killed. And that seems to be the attitude that people have toward Trump right now. And I'm, I look at that and think, well, there's a chance there we'll all be killed, especially if some kind of blowback happens within the country. But if he's doing something that frees humanity, that frees children, that frees us from the lying religions, from the lying bankers, from the lying politicians, from the lying medical people, from the lying scientists, from all of the corruption, maybe what we'll have is a world that looks different, is structured differently, has a different type of governance, different kind of money, etc. Maybe something good will come out of it all, because right now it's ugly.
It's ugly. So
Yeah.
those percentages that I shared with you, I got those as a result. I was down in the Yucatan, and I was in a museum, an old fort on the Yucatan that had been turned into a museum. And that's Mayan territory down there.
Okay, yeah.
And I was reading about the history of the Mayan people, and the Mayans just kept getting their asses kicked.
I know.
Just over and over and over again.
Right.
And what it said in this one area I was reading at this museum was 5% of the Mayans would fight, 15% of the Mayans would resist, and 80% were just so passive.
Yeah.
They just were passive people.
Right.
Probably loving, gentle. They just didn't have it in them to fight.
Yeah.
And I looked at that and I thought, nothing's changed.
That's true.
Because when we look at least my cursory understanding of what's happened on planet Earth with humans, there's lots of other races here where humans, civilizations rise up and then they turn corrupt. And it's the same thing. 5 will fight, 10 will resist, 15 will resist, 80% will just roll over.
That's true.
And that's what I see around me right now. And I know this because I'm involved in social media. So I have viewers. 5% are like right there. They know what's going on. 15% are kind of like, well, it doesn't feel right. I don't like this, but then they go to the mall,
Right.
And then 80% are just like, blah, 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 blah.
I know. I love the people who comment, even if it's bad comments, because it makes you think. It's like, well, at least they're putting their 2 cents in. How many people are just sitting on the couch?
Well, and so then I look at humanity and I think mostly this is what I think, if I'm going to be honest here, I think we're going to get wiped out again. Because 80%, all that consciousness that they hold is just not being used effectively.
I know. Yeah, that's really true. I think, let me go in a direction that's a little bit shocking. Okay. I think we're about to get a shock. Maybe not.
Another one?
Another shock. This is more of along the lines of historical and religious. I think, there's a video out there. I can't think of the name of it. But the guy the guy who does the Y files?
I watched that. And then I watched that same gentleman who did that discovery with Randall Carlson.
Oh, did you?
So I know the story. It's a fascinating story, but boy, the punchline is.
Yeah. It is. I mean, I spent a good portion of the other evening just listening again to portions of that. This was after the Zoom stream, and just making notes and, like on a mind map, trying to make things work. And I ended up with, okay, wow, just a wow. And, for those of you who haven't watched Scott Wolter, Wolter, and his story about the discovery of the green jar, and Scott,
Ancient scroll. Yeah, I've got it.
You have it? Read it.
I've got the Randall Carlson.
Oh,
If
okay.
you just Google Scott Walter, he's done an interview with the guy from the Y Files, about 3 hours, Randall Carlson, about 3 hours. And then there's a Aubrey Marcus interview that I have not seen yet.
Oh, I haven't seen that either.
2 hours. So, okay, before I'm going to ask you to give the punchline, but I want to say this before.
Okay. All right.
My sense, based on watching Scott's body language and the way that he talked to both interviewers, is that he took that deal to be part of the disclosure movement.
Oh, you think so?
I think so, because, and the reason, this is why I think so. I'm not saying I'm right.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that I watched Scott very subtly but effectively really work and complement both interviewers, like really sidle up and really, but really kind of manipulate them with flattery and, oh, you're right, and oh, I didn't see, all this stuff.
Okay.
I think he took that deal because the punchline is going to be a gut punch once it gets out.
Well, it's not for me.
Well, right.
Okay. But I think you're right.
Not for me either, because for some reason from childhood, I always thought, well, that's really, do you believe that really?
Yeah. Right.
The story never got to me.
Yeah.
But a large percentage of the population on this planet, including some influencers or media people with huge millions of people platforms, do believe it.
I know. And it is one of those things. It's, the reason that I think this story is true, because the Kensington stone that he talks about, one of those big stones was found on my farm. And so runes and all, I guess it floated around for a while. They took some photos of it. And then, it said this thing is always in the way. They took it out and buried it. I think I have some idea where they buried it, but
on your property?
Yeah, they just took it. There was a spot in the back, way back toward the woods, that had a really deep, deep hole. And there were a couple of old time Ringer washing machines in there, an old plow, some old head springs. Yeah, it was their own dumping ground. And it was
washing machines and a ruined stone. How about that?
And, there were a few cans and things like that. Well, we hired a earth mover and had them fill that hole in because it was huge. It was huge and it was deep. And so I think we finished burying it right there. So, and it's right in front of what was the back vineyard. But I think, the whole thing, the whole story of somebody was here, the Templars, I've always thought that they were still organized, still alive, still working, still holding some secrets, still waiting for the right time. Because the early things that I read about them probably 30 years ago, 40 years ago, where we don't have to worry about losing the information completely, because we have designed some of the capitals of the world to reflect this knowledge. And those capitals were, I think, Heliopolis in Egypt, maybe another city in Egypt, and Washington, D.C. for sure. And so that I've kind of watched that. I've known for a long time that there were people here trying to take over the planet. I've known for a long time that they were using the Jews to try to do that. But it didn't occur to me that there might have been some mating between the off-planet people and the people known as the Jews. But once I understood that, it was like, Oh, okay. That really changes the story a little bit. Having been raised Catholic, I know that whole story of Elizabeth and, the cousin of Mary, the mother of Jesus. That whole business about it was the Jews who were created to kind of look like the image of the gods. And there were already people here. And that's obvious because I know from my own work that in my own personal history that people on this planet go back a long way, hundreds of millions of years, hundreds of millions. And so the Sumerians and whatever they were doing, the gods, etc. Why did they need so much gold? They needed it for their ship. They used gold also for their consciousness. There's details that have been left out, and I don't want to get too sketchy here because there's too much. I have too much information that that I'm going to end up leaving people confused, because if you don't lay it out, they this and then that, then people are like, what was she talking about? So I think the big thing is that the Yeshua scrolls were found, and they were found in the U.S., and the scroll says that Jesus, it's kind of an autobiography written by Jesus, and basically says, I'm not fully human. I have people from Arcturus. I am from people from Arcturus. And we mated with Jews who were our own creation. So it's a big shocker for people to get that under their belts. So if you get a chance, go listen to Basement Conversation 006, something about Scott Walter, Wolter, and the green jar. So
for me, I thought that not only was that a wild piece of information to get, but that was it the Knights Templar that gathered to decide what the doctrine for the church was going to be?
No, those were the Freemasons.
The Freemasons. So in other words, my understanding is that all the religions was a made up story,
right?
That they decided this is what we're going to tell the people.
Yeah, well, the Christians, Constantine's wife was a big factor in that story. They were just trying to get people to come together. The Freemasons have gotten a bad rap. I think what I would say is you need to think about the Knights Templar differently from the Freemasons, especially the P2 Freemasons and the P3 Freemasons. They have gone off in a new direction. The Knights Templar, the real knights, they have stuck to the task, which is holding this information that is needed for humanity to evolve itself. And why this time? I guess it's time. So,
So is that why you feel that maybe we're not all going down again? That maybe there is a path that we can come together, and
it's up to us. We can, and I think some people will. Lots of people will come together. The ones who don't, it's like, well, okay, we'll see you next time. But the ones who do come together, the surprise, the shock, the excitement. Let me make a comment about Scott. I watched him like a hawk as well, looking for any signs of lying. What I picked up from him was his great discomfort in being a man of science, and having to talk about all these things that were not his field for such a long time. And he was trying to not look like an idiot in saying what he had to say. But the work that they did with those translations, those were pretty amazing. So, there were things that I thought he's really uncomfortable talking about this. And so that's where I saw he would try to get across to either AJ from the Y Files. And I didn't listen to Randall Carlson, but he may have been doing the same thing with Randall, trying to say, I hope you don't think I'm crazy because I'm saying this, but this is what we found.
Yeah.
So that's
I did a deep sense of excitement. Like this was just for him the journey and the discovery and each mission to go out and it's like was so exciting.
Yeah.
For him.
Yeah, I could sense that too. He is looking at what's happening in the world today, and he said it toward the end of his talk with AJ in the Y Files. He said, when I think about what this scroll is telling us and what's possible, and I look at what's happening in the world, he said, something needs to be done. And he talked about being willing to fight or ready to fight. And I thought, yeah, but fight with your information first. Fight with your consciousness first. It's going to be up to people and what they do with their consciousness that decides who wins in this whole war situation. And it's a planetary fight. It's not a little squabble. It's not just, a military thing, even though the military is involved. It's a way of life, and it's a control grid that is you just need to take out some of the key places. And yes, there's an option for all kinds of things to go wrong. And a few things have gone wrong. But that's the nature of war. You do your best, and you plan accordingly, and you know where you're going and what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you keep your eye open for options that weren't part of the plan. But overall, when I heard Trump saying, okay, I'm not going to bomb Iran's, I don't know, desalination plants and electric plants and all that. They're in their grid, their electric grid. I thought, okay, so he was pushing that for a reason. Maybe the shock value, et cetera, but that's how he plays his cards. Boom. And you want to talk? Yeah, let's talk. Forget about that. Let's talk. So, and he's done that over and over and over. And I don't know if people are just not seeing the pattern, or if they're thinking that he keeps backing down. I'm like, yeah, that's his way. You either make nice with him, or he's going to come out with guns a-blazing, and he isn't fooling. So
what I can't get to, and I'm not surprised at that, because this is a big issue going on here on Earth. It's not a little issue.
Yeah.
I can't understand, and maybe you referred to it when you said something big is going to happen. I can't understand how we go from this incredible mess. I mean, here in the US, we have been so defrauded. I mean, and stolen from and used and abused. And I'm talking about the general person who gets in the car and drives to work.
I know.
They hate every day paying their taxes.
That worries me.
All of it went for nothing that they said it was going to. It was just stolen. And we were encouraged to keep working. You're going to be a success. Be happy. Don't, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how we get from this enormous mess. We don't need new politicians. We don't need new elections. We need a new system.
Yeah.
But I don't know how we go from this tremendous mess to coming together with leaders or leadership that is reliable, because I'm starting to think anybody that goes into a leadership position is a psychopath by the very nature of they want to be a leader.
That's true. We can't have the kinds of leadership. We can't have the kinds of organizations of peoples that we've had. And that is what, you know, the little man in brown robe said over and over. The time of nations is passing. The time of nations is over. Nations are done. It was a stepping stone to a higher form of governance. And at the time, I was like, what are you talking about? There's nothing higher than democracy. And so,
yeah, I would have said the same thing. What are you?
Yeah, right.
Told it's great.
So, I know. And I think we are going to break up so that we can be closer to whoever we're leading from, you know, allowing to lead, etc. Lots and lots of leaders. One of the steps that I've seen was that the U.S. breaks up into about 5 regions, and there's 5 different presidents. They all use the U.S. Constitution as their base document, and they make their rules accordingly, you know, that fit their region and their people. And that breaks up even further from there. But that's the first break. So I don't think we need to be afraid of that. And I don't think we're going to lose our United States in the process. We're going to lose the corruption that was taking advantage of all of us. And to go back to your comment about how are we going to get there, I think it's the anger of the people that is going to prevent what I'm going to call a Trumpian solution from taking place. I think Trump still views the United States as one thing. And, you know, I don't think he even wants to be the president, but he wants it to hold together. And I don't think that that's going to happen because the anger of the people, because they've been defrauded, because they've been lied to, because they've been used, because they've been sucked dry for so long.
Oh, a car went by. Sorry.
I was going to say, what is that? Yeah, I think the people are gonna have to find an outlet for their anger, and that's what I see as the big difficulty that prevents us from moving forward as we have always been, one single country. And so I think that break up, that change, that shock actually happens over the next 2 to 3 years. So it maybe begins this midterm election.
From my perspective,
yeah,
Trump has not done himself any favors in the way he's communicated with the American people.
That's true. Why?
It's been so harsh, and so many issues that we were attached to,
yes,
have been dismissed in a brutal way.
Yeah, right. That's the shock value of the wake up. It's hard. Yeah.
Well, you know, as angry as I am, and I think I brought this up to you before, but I'll make this point here because I think that there are some viewers that might appreciate it.
Okay.
For instance, with the Epstein files, the fact that the DOJ is not going to pursue they've stopped all the investigations. There's not going to pursue anybody in the Epstein files. Todd Blanche, number 2 at the DOJ, said it's not a crime to party with Epstein. The resources that the DOJ has is minuscule compared to the resources of the population of the US.
Oh my, yeah.
And all those tech nerds who know how to do stuff and uncover information and track down leads and this and that, the resources of the American people are so much greater
I know.
than anything the government could have done. And if the government had pursued it, we'd be looking at years of legal entanglement and stays and continuances and lawyers speak and this and that. Whereas I think the public is going to get down to brass tacks, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. So one of the things that came out in the Q messages was that they had the dirt on everybody who was involved, thousands and thousands of people. And they were making deals with them saying, you know, either you tell us who's behind you or who was pulling your strings, or, you know, who, blah, blah, blah. Give us the lowdown. If not, we're going to prosecute you. And if you don't tell us, then, you know, or if you do tell us and you make a deal with us, we will leave you in place. And Q said, we have to leave hundreds of the bad boys in place, because if we took everybody out, there would be no governments left anywhere. It would all fall apart. And they were trying to avoid the chaos, you know, creating chaos for the people. I think the people are going to create the chaos for themselves because of the anger. And I think I was listening to Bosey, not Cardinal, what's his name? Colonel Bosey, Ricardo Bosey, the other day, and he was saying the first Trump first Trump presidency, they had all of the same stuff planned and something wasn't ready. I don't know what, I can't remember what wasn't ready. And it might have been that the BRICS financial system was not ready, or the alternative financial system. That's what they're planning to use, even though they say, oh, that's, you know, terrible. It wasn't ready. And so they said, well, we're going to have to let Biden get in there. And then when Trump gets reelected his second time, then all of this is going to take place. So we had a 4-year stint there with Biden, and nobody was happy about that. But everybody thought that the Trump that we had in the first presidency was going to be the same Trump we had in the second one. And that's really not been the case. And so they are trying to keep enough structure in place so that people can get reorganized. If we go and tear everything apart and create absolute and utter chaos like they are doing in China right now, then all bets are off. So the how will be if we can get past the anger and just say, we're not doing that, we're doing this, and then just do it. And do it in a way that is, you know, going along, doing your thing, minding your own business, doing what you think you need to be doing, listening to who you need to listen to. Eventually, I think all of that, the ugly stuff, is going to move over to say, yeah, we want to be part of that, because that works, because that is something that, you know, we were hoping you would do, that kind of thing. If we tear it apart and do, you know, start killing our authorities, that's not going to be good. So,
Well, how do you release that anger, though? That pressure that's building up. People are getting so frustrated.
I know.
I know. There's no area, at least in the U.S. right now, where things are smooth. There's just no. We're being squished like bugs. Our food is poisoned.
Right.
The financials, I mean, nobody can afford anything.
No, that's true. So I think, you know, the anger, I don't know what the answer is to that. That anger, the only thing I know about really ferocious anger is that a primal scream will diffuse that anger. That primal scream is something that when you hear a primal scream, you know it. It makes your hair stand up, and it changes you chemically. It changes your entire chemistry immediately. The only other things that I know of are fighting. That's one of them, or exercise. That's another. And right now, I think exercise might be an option because everybody's in such bad shape. You know, don't try to fight until you've done a little exercise. But then maybe you won't want to fight afterwards. But at this point, I mean, how many people are even listening to that kind of thinking? How, they look at what Trump is doing. They're listening to all the people talking about what's happening and all the lies and all the propaganda, both sides fighting, doing crazy, saying crazy things. And the thread, there's this little fine thread that is being ignored, which has to do with the deep state. And that ties together all of the things, Venezuela, everything, China, Taiwan, the U.S. We're coming to a world that is totally different, looks totally different, feels totally different. And I'm kind of excited about that. I've been excited about the change for a long time because I knew for such a long time the ugly stuff that was happening. And right now, even though Trump might be schlepping all over the place, not telling us, not sharing with us, trying to protect us, we aren't little kids. We're full-grown adults. And that, he really needs to say more, but he can't say a whole lot without giving out the plan and having the deep state get ahead of him. And it's not quite done yet. Almost. So I think this year it'll be done. There'll be some other things that have to be cleaned up, and that'll take another 5 or 10 years. But when I've been into the future, it is beautiful. It's like, oh, wow.
Okay, what are we talking about here, time-wise?
10 years.
Okay, so some of us might make it.
Some of us, yeah, some of us. If you're taking care of yourself, another 10 years, yeah. This is a war. You're going to learn a lot about consciousness in this war. That's one of the benefits of the whole war. It's not the way I would like to go about teaching. But, when you've been treated, like when somebody's used a monkey wrench on your mind, you get pretty smart pretty quick. And there's a feel, that people have not been encouraged even to feel. They certainly have not been encouraged to think or to put 2 and 2 together.
No.
But yeah, we are coming to something that is really nice. So, if you can hang in there, you guys.
Oh, do you have any final thoughts, Penny? We've been an hour and a half already, believe it or not.
Let's see. Hang on. Did we cover everything? Okay, let me close with one of the points that you made. You said, I'm very concerned about the impact the war with Iran will have on the world's population. Widespread famine is a real possibility. It is. Terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, possibly taking out our grids, no gas for cars and trucks, meltdown of civilization, significant loss of life. Where's the concern? Where's the heavy planning? Okay, right there. That's the closing thought. Get concerned with taking charge of your life. Okay? That doesn't mean you have to be nasty. It doesn't mean you have to be, don't be like Donald Trump, okay? But be concerned about where we are going as a population and start to take charge in little ways. grow some food. Make sure that you are connected to family if they're scattered around the US or the world. Stay in connection. Find ways to make sure you can stay in connection. Maybe a satellite phone, which is something not a lot of people have. And get healthy. Stay healthy, because you're going to need that health for the resilience that it gives you as the shocks of the changes come and go. And the last thing I would say is sit back and watch, and just watch what's happening and learn from it. There, you will need to put your 2 cents in later when everything is being, I'll call it, reorganized. Okay? We need you. We need you. And whether I'm right or wrong about Trump, I'm in this conversation, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. There are other conversations where I've been like, oh, okay. But if you follow your own train of thought, develop it all the way, and put it aside and develop another one. And then maybe a third one. And just follow through and let yourself see what's really happening. So we'll be okay. We're gonna be okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Penny. I appreciate your time, and everyone appreciates your time. I hope this was helpful to all of you watching. Answered a few questions. Definitely go watch the Y-Files interview. It's Y-Files in the Basement with Scott Wolter, Wolter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. You get a wake-up call right there. Woohoo.
If that gets out into the mainstream, it's big. It's going to be quite the...
Right. I think we're going to hear lots of people say, oh, that's horse pucky. Somebody made that up. That's not true, blah, blah, blah. You know what? Be careful of that kind of thinking, because it is, I'll just say, there are some things that I have experienced that would let me say that is very true.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back next month. I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about.
Yeah, right.
April.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, I might not have good things to say about Trump next time. So, take what I say as this is a line of thinking. Okay. Yeah. That's actually what I should close with. Allow yourself to think opposing things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Oh, I think I'm going to dump us.
Yeah, you're the one that's got to click us off out of here.
All right.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.